Nik Perspective is the tool to fix any kind of distortion in your image that could be caused by a wide angle lens or an inexpensive lens. Maybe you're too close to your subject or the camera isn't quite level. There's all kinds of reasons that we can have distortion, but Perspective is the tool to correct all of that distortion. To explore this, I have some images that we're going to edit and learn all about the interface and the tools available to us. So let's hop over into Workshop Images, and then we'll hop into the Nik Perspective folder. And I just want to show one thing here. There is a presets folder in here with the preset for Nik Color Effects. You will be using that later on in this exercise, so it's there for you. We're going to start by opening this apartments.tiff file. So I'm going to bring that into Photoshop. I'm just going to drag and drop that into Photoshop, and we have this image here. We can see that it's got some issues with distortion. So I will zoom this to fill the frame. You can see that this pole on the right is a little bit warped. Nothing is level. The windows are crooked. So we need to fix all of that stuff, as well as tonal values and the color in the image. We're going to do that at the end. So let's begin by hopping over into Perspective. So I'm going to use my Nik Collection 6 palette. If you don't see that, hit File, Automate, Nik Collection 6 palette, and that's going to show up for you. And then I'm going to go down here to Perspective and click on that, and this image is going to open. The first thing that you're going to notice is the interface is different. It doesn't look like all the other tools, but that's for a very good reason. We need additional view options to fix all of this distortion and to know exactly where we are. So let me explore this interface with you. At the very top, we have our before and after button that we have on the other apps. It just looks like a different icon. We don't see anything happening yet because we haven't done anything. There's no after. We have our side-by-side before and after window. We click to show that, click again to make that go away. We can look at things at 100%, and we have a little hand that allows us to zoom around. So we don't have the little navigator window. We just have a hand that we can click and drag, and then we can fit the image to screen by clicking on that. And then we have this grid over here. So if we show the overlay grid, this grid is really important to help us understand what needs to be fixed. We can look at the grid and see that this pole is way out of line. We can see that the windows aren't level. We've got all kinds of issues. The grid really helps us to see that. These next two icons here are for adding and showing guidelines. We're going to get to that as we go forward, so don't worry about those right now. I'm going to turn this grid off. On the lower left-hand corner, we have our options and our preferences dialog. So we can change our language, our background color. That grid that I just showed you, we can change the size of that grid to make it more granular or smaller squares. We can display the image size, just more information. So whatever you want to do to set up your interface, this is where you do it. So I'm going to save that. And also this question mark here takes you to the user manual. So if you have any questions, you can just click on that and you can see exactly what you're working with. Okay, now what we're going to do is explore the right-hand side of the interface. We're going to be doing that hands-on. We have a bunch of things to fix in this image, and I think we need every single tool available to us, so we will explore those as we are fixing the distortion in this image. So the very first thing is let's try automatically fixing the distortion in the image. So I'm going to click on Auto. And the very first thing that Nik Perspective asks me to do is to open the original image file. Why do I need to do that? Well, the original file is not a TIFF file, it's a RAW file. It was shot with a Sony Alpha. That image has a bunch of metadata in it. It has a bunch of image information about the camera sensor and angles and all kinds of stuff, the lens that was used. And so Nik Perspective needs that information because it wasn't in the TIFF file. So when I created that TIFF file, that information didn't go forward. And so that's why we need to do that. So I'm going to click on Open. And then in Nik Perspective, I've added that ARW file. That's a Sony Alpha RAW file. And so what it's going to do, it's not going to open the file, it's just going to grab that information about the lens and camera and all that stuff, and then it's going to apply that. So we can see this was shot with a Sony Alpha, and which lens was used and the name of that raw file. And it's going to try to correct any issues that were in that image. In this image, it's even more than Perspective can handle. There are more things going on than an automatic correction can handle. So as we go forward, we're going to see that we need some manual overrides in this image. But that's okay, because we have all of those tools. So by default, auto works for most images. In this one, it's a good starting point, but as we move forward, we'll have to go to a more advanced mode. Perspective, we're going to come back to volume deformation here in a second. Perspective is where we want to be. So we can correct verticals, so these vertical lines. We can correct horizontals, so the horizontals like the tops of buildings, these windows here. Or we can just say verticals only or horizontals only. In this image, we mainly have verticals. We don't have any horizontals, but let's just see what happens if we leave it to the default and click auto. And we get this. The perspective of this image could not be automatically corrected. The reason for that is we don't have enough information here. We don't have a rooftop or anything. It's just sort of a confusing image for a computer to understand what's going on. So what we're going to do is manually make some adjustments. So the first thing we're going to do is say we want to correct the verticals only. And I'm going to do that using these little lines here. So I'm going to take these lines and I'm going to put them on the vertical lines in the image. So I need to find strong vertical lines. So let's see, we've got this little line right here. So we'll line that up. So that should be straight. And we're going to put this one on this pole right here. That should also be straight. So we're going to use that to fix as much as we can. So then I'm going to apply that. And now we're getting a little bit closer. How close are we? Let's look at our grid. So looking at this with my eye, it doesn't look like it's perfect. So let's use some tools to see how far away we are. I'm going to click on the guides toolbar, and this is going to allow me to add some help. So on the bottom left-hand corner, I can either add a vertical guide or a horizontal guide. These are just tools to help us see how our corrections are going. So I have clicked on the vertical guide. I'm going to go out here on my image and I'm going to click it next to this vertical pipe here. And there we go. It's on there. And now I can hover over that and I can move this anywhere I want in an image. So I can start looking. Oh, that's actually vertical. That's vertical. That's vertical. That's vertical. That's vertical. So to my eye, it's not perfectly vertical, but when I start looking at this, guess what? It is. It is absolutely vertically corrected. So why does it look like it's not? Well, the reason for that is when I took the photo, I wasn't exactly perpendicular to that wall at the back of those apartments. The camera was angled a little bit, and so the windows look crooked. So they're not level, they're just distorted. I need to fix that distortion. So let's start doing that. So we have some tools for that. We have this up and down, left and right, and HV ratio. So let me just show you what they do. Up and down, if I start sliding this up and down, you can start to see that, whoa, it looks like I'm going to skyscraper. Down, it looks like I'm looking down. So I can start correcting any kind of issues if my camera wasn't exactly flat to whatever image. If I was too far up or down, I can fix that in post-production. The other thing I can do, I'm going to make sure that's back to 0, is do left and right. And in this image, that's where we're going to fix our window issues in the back. In fact, I'm going to move this to the right just a little bit, and all of a sudden, things are starting to be fixed. So I'm going to fudge this until I get it pretty darn close. I think about 20 is looking pretty good. I'm using my grid line to see if these windows line up, and they do. I can actually go in here and add a horizontal guide. So I'll click on horizontal guide. I'll go over here and click on the image. Then as I hover over this, I can check and see how well I did looking at the windows themselves. So those windows are now looking horizontal. We don't have that distortion that we did before. So these guides just are helping me. I'll have to move this one since I changed the image. I'm looking to see if things are exactly right. And I'm already spotting, if I add another vertical guide here, I'm already spotting another issue that I have in this image. If we look over here on the right, look at this line. It doesn't stay vertical. It's curved. And the reason for that is we have some distortion from our lens. So things are starting to look like a barrel. I can fix that as well. So I'm going to go to the top in the distortions area, and instead of auto, I'm going to click on manual. And what I can do there is I can choose barrel distortion. That's when things look like a barrel. They've been pushed out. Or pin cushion, that looks like things are sort of sucked in. Or fisheye, where you see like way too much of the world looking at maybe one of those mirrors that you see in a parking garage where you see everything. Those three types of distortion. And then I can change that. So let me just exaggerate. I have it on barrel right now. If I go way to the right, you can see how that moves things one direction. If I go way to the left, it moves them a different direction. Pin cushion, the same thing. So it's just saying what kind of correction I'm making. We have three options to choose from, and we can really get to the point we want to be very quickly. So in this image, looking at this line, I think that's barrel distortion. So I'm going to move this slider until I start to see that line being exactly vertical. Luckily, my guide is here. I can move that to the left. Now it's exactly straight. We don't have that curve anymore. I can check that. I can check the other lines here. That's all these guides are for you to check to see if everything is lining up the way you want it to line up. So I have verticals everywhere. My horizontals, let me see if they're still looking good. They are. So fantastic. So we've used our distortion both in auto and manual mode. We've used our perspective, verticals only. And you can do that the same thing we did for horizontals. If you have a building or something, auto is going to work great. So you can choose what kind of correction works best for your image. This works pretty good for us. What is volume deformation? Well, we have two different options here, horizontal and vertical, and then diagonal. So those are for those times when maybe you have a wide angle lens and you get just a little too close to your subject. If they're right in the center, then usually you use the horizontal and vertical adjustment, and that'll fix those big noses and things. Or maybe you have somebody to the side and they're pointing and their arm looks super long, or a building looks super stretched out. You can use those diagonals to automatically correct that. We don't have any of that in this image, but that's what those buttons are for. They are there and available for you. Okay, so we have some other things here. Reshape. We have the horizon tool. So if you have a horizon, if you're doing a scenic photo, an architectural photo, and the whole thing is shifted to the side and you need to correct that, you can either click auto, or you can click on either a horizontal or vertical line and just drag that across and it'll automatically correct. This image is okay. We don't want to mess it up, but that's there for you. You can also drag the angle slider so you can change the angle of your image if you want. I don't want to do that with this one, but you can do that as well. And then also we have this crop. So as we're making corrections to our image, it's being distorted and stretched and reshaped, and so we need to chop those areas out. And so I can turn that off and you will see exactly what's happened here. Okay, you can see that we've stretched out this right-hand side. We've moved the bottom up. It's not set correctly. If we just left it as is, we need to chop off the excess. So that's what the crop tool is doing. It's automatically chopping that off. So you can manually crop using the crop tool here. You can use an automatic crop, which is what I prefer to do. And then also the aspect ratio. You can preserve the original aspect ratio of the image based on whatever you shot. You can preserve that, or you can choose one of your liking. These are a bunch of the most common aspect ratios built in. Or you can say unconstrained. I usually choose unconstrained because that gives me as much of the image as possible, and that way it just chops off the excess stuff, and I can do cropping later on in Photoshop or whatever after I have done all of my finishing touches to the image. So now we have gone through all of these different things, and this is looking pretty good. But when I look at it, I still see something that bothers me. Something is not quite right, and it's this down here. So I'm going to go into 100%. I'm using my hand to drag over. This line right here, it's so close to the window that when we look at this in the entirety of the image, it makes it look like the window is warped, and it's not. It's just this wire that happens to be coming out of the window. The same thing is true of this little air conditioner unit over here. There's another wire over here that's got some issues. So I want to be able to reshape those areas. Luckily, there's a tool called Reshape built in to Perspective. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to go to the Reshape area, and we have different grid sizes, 4x4, 8x8, 16x16, or a custom size, however many grid areas you want. Let me show you exactly how those work. So I'm going to do a big grid, 4x4, and just so we can see what's going on, I'm going to turn off my guides. So I've got my Reshape tool on. There it is. And so we can see we have this grid here. So it's 4 squares by 4 squares. And what I can do is I can grab any of these points, and as I pull that point, it reshapes that area of the image. So if I want to make large, giant changes, you might want to use a small grid like this one. I'm going to reset that. You can also drag and get several points and then move all of those at the same time. I'm going to reset that. So that looks really good. The other thing you can do is if you start pulling something off the screen, how do you see that? Use Command or Control on a PC to zoom in and out, and then you can see these different areas. Maybe if you've moved a point off the screen, that's how you can get there. Okay, I'm going to reset this and then show this in the screen. And what I want to do is I want to control this tiny area here. So this grid as it is too large, because if I make a change, it makes a change to too much of this area. So instead, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use the 32 by 32 grid, and that gives me a lot more control over the fine details in the image. So I want to go down here and change just this area. So I'm going to zoom in to 100%. And now you'll see that I don't have my hand anymore. I have my cursor for selecting different points, but how do I get over to that area? I hit the space bar. Holding the space bar down gives me the hand, and then I can move over to that area. So what I want to do is I want to move this wire so it's straight. So what I'll do is I'm just going to start pulling these guys over very, very gently until I get somewhere that's good. That looks pretty good, something like that. And now that's straight. It follows the line of the window. It's not going to distract me anymore. That's pretty good. Then we also have an area over here. Let's zoom back out to full screen so we see everything. This line right here, I don't like that. I'm going to see if we can get rid of that. So let's zoom in to 100%. Let's go over to where that line is, that little wire. There it is. And what I'll do here is I'll grab several of these, and then let's reshape that. Reshape that there, grab this, reshape that there. We're just reshaping this entire thing here. There we go, all the way out. And we're seeing everything. So I'm intentionally making this a wonky thing because I know it's not going to be in the image. It's going to be cropped out of the image. So I can be a little bit more crazy with the edits I make over here, because when I apply this, I'll hit apply, you'll see it's cropped out. And now that wire is gone. It's not distracting. This is now set to a vertical. It's not distracting anymore. I can check. I think this looks pretty good. I'm just going to make one quick adjustment to that. So I'll go back in here. Let's go back into 100%, over to this air conditioner. And then I just want to make a very, very minute adjustment to this right here. So we'll just pull that out just a little bit, this just a little bit. Now it's exactly on that line and it lines up at the bottom. I know I'm being really picky, but guess what? I can be picky because I have the tools to do it. Okay, now back to our full view. That looks great. I will hit apply, and I really like that. So we've cropped everything. We've fixed the left and right issue. The horizontals, the verticals are all done. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit save. As soon as you hit save, the changes that you've made to your image are committed. So this is destructive. As soon as you hit save, those changes are committed forever. So be careful. Make sure you're done with the image. I'm going to hit save. This is going to take me back into Photoshop. And you can see I don't have a new layer. I have just that same image that I worked on. Now this looks pretty good. I think we can do more to it. So I have in Color Effects a favorite that I've created called Apartment Windows. And so what we're going to do is we are going to apply that in Photoshop using our Nik Collection palette. So I will just click on that. It's going to go into Color Effects. It's going to apply this preset that I created. That's the preset that I put in that folder I told you about earlier. And then we actually have an image that's worth looking at. I absolutely love what we got here. In fact, we can take a closer look without all the distractions. I really love what we did. Okay, there's one more thing I didn't show you in perspective. It's called the miniature effect. And so it allows you to emulate a tilt shift lens. It's where you create a very shallow depth of field across a line. And doing that can make things that are natural size look like toys. It's really fun. So let me show you how to do that. So in Photoshop, I will close out this image here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to zip over here and we're going to get this train.tiff. Let's load that into Photoshop. And then we have this nice little metro train from above. And then what we want to do is again throw that into perspective. So I'm going to go to my perspective button and we're back into perspective. Now this is going to be something that we're not correcting anything, we're causing some distortion. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom of the image to miniature effect, and we are going to turn that on by clicking here. And then I'm going to click this little icon to see the actual effect. So I'm going to put these lines where I want my image to be in focus, is where this middle is here. I can move these lines to a different angle. So this middle area is in focus, a transition area, and everything from the dotted line forward is blurred. You can change that blur by clicking here, moving that left and right. You can see lots of blur, not very much blur. You sort of put that to where you want. And then you can change the transition area by changing these dotted lines. So no blur, a transition from no blur to blur, total blur. And by moving these, making these a little bit more narrow, exactly like that, I'm going to apply that. And now our train looks like a little toy. It looks like a little toy that we've stuck and built, and these look like little animated, models that we put on a table. I can even accentuate that by changing this up and down. So maybe I'll distort this a little bit more so it looks like I'm shooting from a tabletop. And it's just a fun thing to do. You can play with this until you get the look exactly right. But I think that's pretty good. I'm going to move this down just a hair so it's still on our train. Apply that. Okay, I like that. I'm going to hit save, bring that back into Photoshop. And now we have a little toy train, and it's a really fun effect to have. That is Nik Perspective. You can see that you can correct just about any problem you have from distortion in your images and even create some fun looking photos. Well, this is also the end of our exploration of the Nik collection. The next step is for you to use your images with the Nik collection. Start with the presets, but then go beyond them by creating your own custom presets. Mix and match different Nik apps, and you're gonna have a style that is all your own. I cannot wait to see what you create. Thank you for joining me as we explored the Nik collection. But there's one more piece of software that I want to show you. It's DxO Pure Raw. It's the perfect companion to the Nik collection. So let's take a look at that.